Welcome to the Geobreeze Travel Podcast, a show for anyone wanting to level up their travel hacking lifestyle. I'm your host, Julia Menez. I'm a travel hacker, coach, speaker, Filipino-American ENTJ who loves solid travel gear and using shortcuts on spreadsheets. On this show, I'm on a mission to bring you travel hackers from all walks of life to help you level up your travel hacking game. We dive into credit cards, miles, points, strategy, mindset, and the secrets behind how to travel the world for next to no cost. So, let's get hacking.
For my Southwest points, I rarely, if ever, transfer from Chase just because the points value, you're not getting much value out of those. If I have points built up in my Southwest account from, let's say, a credit card, I'll use those. But if I don't have Southwest points, I'm usually just paying cash for those. But I do have a couple Southwest credit cards. So right now I have a huge stash of points there. So I will use those, but I generally will not transfer over from Chase because I can get better value out of those points using them elsewhere.
Hello, travel hackers. You just heard a clip from Katie Seemann from Zen Life and Travel. Katie is a mom and travel writer based in Columbus, Ohio. She is an award travel writer for upgradedpoints.com as well as various other websites. In addition to traveling for free, using points and miles, Katie also gets paid to travel by producing sponsored content for her blog. In today's episode, we talk about how Katie got started with a game of points and miles and how she has been able to turn her travel hobby into a lucrative career that she balances with being a stay-at-home mom. One of the best ways to get featured on other outlets is by doing guest posts to build up your portfolio. If you are looking to get started with writing guest posts about your points and miles travel, I would love to feature your story on the Geobreeze Travel blog. This is a great way to get yourself featured on my website and my Instagram, especially if you are shy about interviewing on the podcast or presenting during one of our monthly hangouts. For more information on how to submit a post, check out geobreezetravel.com/guest post, and I will leave a link to that in the show notes for you. And now, on with the show. Hey, Katie, welcome to the Geobreeze Travel Podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you today. So before we jump straight into questions, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into points and miles.
Well, I am a mom. I live in Columbus, Ohio. And I got into miles and points, about 5 years ago now, at the end of 2015. And I opened up my first credit card about a month after I found out about the hobby. A guy that my husband had worked with kind of told him about the hobby, gave us some resources, and I sort of took it and ran. I started reading every miles and points blog I could find. And that first year, I ended up opening 12 credit cards and earned close to 1 million points. And then by the end of the first year, I had my own points and miles blog. So I dove in and I haven't looked back since. And it's been about 5 years.
That's incredible. 12 cards in your first year. Were you double dipping, triple dipping, just getting 3 cards at a time? How does that work?
Yeah, that was between my husband and I. So some cards we would get the same card for both of us if there was a really good deal. And I probably got a new card every single month. I wanted more and more. As soon as I hit that minimum spend on one card, I got another one. I've since slowed down a little bit because you can't do that for year after year after year. But that first year, I kind of went full force with any card I could find.
Yeah, 524 now, which didn't exist 5 years ago, definitely limits the ability of people to replicate that same process. But what were some of the first cards that you had signed up for?
My very first one was the Chase Sapphire Preferred, which I think is the first one for many of us for a lot of different reasons. It's a great overall card. And then my second one was the American Express Platinum card. I got a flyer in the mail for the 100,000 point sign-up bonus. Had no clue that was a great bonus at the time. I just got it. I was, 6 weeks into this. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. Okay, maybe I'll get this card. Little did I know that that's pretty hard to get. So yeah, those were my first 2. And then I just started adding from there.
Were you getting different cards each time, or were you getting a card, closing it down, and then getting it again for the same sign-up bonus?
No, the first year I was just getting different cards. Eventually, I would leave them all open for at least a year. I didn't want to, get the sign-up bonus and close them down. That's not great etiquette when it comes to travel hacking. But so I was just getting different cards based on what travel I had planned, or if I happened to get a great sign-up bonus like that Amex Platinum sign-up bonus. I didn't really have much of a plan in the beginning, which was probably not great. So some of my card choices were not the best. So I got a little bit of everything that first year.
What were some of the cards that you got where now if somebody well, now that we're all subject to 524, where you would say, maybe cards that do this, avoid it. If you had to do all of this over again in today's environment, what would your approach be like?
Yeah. One of the cards that I got that I wish I hadn't gotten was it was a gold Delta Sky Miles. And we had a trip planned, I don't know, to Florida or something. And I thought, well, we can fly to Delta there, so I'll get this Delta card. Not realizing that that's something I probably should have just paid for with cash, not gotten the Delta card. I didn't really have much use for that. So those like very specific cards where I didn't really have a good plan for those miles were not a great idea at the time.
So especially in today's world, the advice would be you are limited to the number of cards that you can get, especially for Chase. Have a plan of where you want to go rather than just signing up for every mail-in, because we're limited now. We can't do 12 cards in a year anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Have a plan.
If we could, I would have gone crazy over and over again.
I know, me too.
So tell us a little bit about your Points and Miles blog that you started.
My blog is called Zen Life and Travel. And when I started it, it was primarily miles and points because I had so many friends asking me, what are you doing? What is this? Why do you have so many credit cards? How are you traveling so much? So I just thought, well, why not? I was a stay-at-home mom then, so I needed something to do with my brain. So I started it, and it's eventually morphed into more of a pure travel blog where I do mention miles and points, but it's not the primary subject matter. I talk more about places to go, things to do when you get there, great hotels, things like that. So it's morphed over the years, but it's a lot of fun. I love it. It's given me a whole new career, which is kind of cool. As a mom, to go from, a stay-at-home mom to a travel writer is kind of a fun thing.
That's amazing. And so is that how you got into writing for Upgraded Points, which is a huge travel hacking blog as well? Did somebody just find your blog and say, we really like your writing style? Can you do some contributing articles? Can you tell us a little bit about that career trajectory?
Yeah, it's all from miles and points. After writing my blog for a few years, I kind of thought, well, maybe I should look into writing for someone else, see what else I can do with this. And I believe I don't know if they put out a feeler or if I was on their website. I had been featured on one of their like true redemption stories a while back, so I'd heard of them. And I found out that they were looking for writers. So I emailed them, contacted them, and we did kind of a trial period at first, and it worked. It was a good fit. And so I've been writing for them for a couple of years now. And it's all thanks to getting into travel hacking. So it's pretty cool that I got a career out of, opening some credit cards and traveling a lot.
Absolutely. I think it's really helpful too to have that portfolio to say, hey, I know how to write and I have coherent articles. Here's my entire blog. Here's a whole bunch of writing samples. Because I know a lot of travel hackers, their dream is kind of, oh, I'm going to get some points and miles. I'm going to post some pretty pictures on Instagram. Somebody's going to find me and offer a career based off of all of this. But you really have to build up a portfolio to show somebody, hey, I can do this if I want to get hired on full time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I had my own blog probably at least 2 years, I think, before I branched out and started writing for other blogs.
And did you have a journalism background before you became a stay-at-home mom?
Not at all. I was a fashion designer. So I went to school in New York City. I went to the Fashion Institute. I was working as a designer in Manhattan. And I'd always wanted something creative. And it turned out fashion was not what I wanted it to be. It changed a lot from the time I got into it to the time I was working in it. And the industry itself was not great. So I ended up kind of leaving that. I came back to where I grew up in Ohio, had my daughter, and I just was craving something creative. And that's how I ended up writing. People started telling me I was a pretty decent writer. So I kind of kept going with it. And so here I am now. And I like this so much more. It's a really good fit for me, I think.
What kind of schedule do you have when it comes to writing for Upgraded Points? Are you more on the freelance contributing writer side, or are you a staff writer and so you have a regular schedule? How does that work for you?
No, it's all freelance. And it varies based on what I have going on, what they have going on. This year has been really tough because I've had my daughter home a lot more than usual. She has not been in school full time, so I've just not had the time to write as much as I did like last year. But it's all freelance, which is great because it's really flexible. And, if I'm going on a trip, I just tell them I'm not going to be submitting anything these weeks. But they've been great to work with because it's, they know I've got a daughter, and some weeks I'm just not going to be able to submit anything. Other weeks I can submit a lot. So it's been a really good partnership, I think.
Whenever you go on a travel hacking redemption trip, how many articles can you normally get out of that? Do you say, here's an article on the flights I took, here's an article on the hotels I stayed at, here's a destination article, here's an article on the different credit cards that I use for this? What's that structure look like?
When I first started my blog, it was more like that. Right now, if I go on a trip, I tend to write an article that's, so many things to do in this destination. If I go to a really nice hotel, like in Hawaii, it was the Grand Hyatt Kauai, I will do a hotel review. And within the hotel review, if I did pay for it with points, I'll kind of outline how I went about that, how I went about earning the points, the credit cards I use, that kind of thing. I've kind of gotten out of writing for my personal blog dedicated points and miles articles. So usually if I go somewhere, it's a things to do and then a hotel. And depending on the location, I might add one more. If we're scuba diving, for example, I usually will write a whole article just about scuba diving in that location. So it varies. I don't have a specific structure for when I travel.
And that makes sense that your travel blog, Zen Life and Travel, wouldn't have a whole bunch of miles and points content, because if you're recycling the same thing that you're then selling to upgraded points, that would be a little bit.
Yeah, and it's nice that I can really get into the weeds of miles and points details for upgraded points and focus more on the travel aspect for my blog. It's a good balance.
Makes sense. And then for your blog, are a lot of the hotel reviews sponsored content as well, or are you going in there kind of as a undercover person? I forget the term in journalism where you're undercover, they don't know that you're writing a review on this hotel. How does that work from your regular blog side?
If I do a hotel review, I think all of the ones I've done so far were not sponsored. I do go on some sponsored trips, but on those posts, it's more of what to do in a certain area. And I tend to not do hotel reviews for those trips unless they specifically asked. And so far, those trips, they have not specifically asked for a hotel review. So the hotel reviews that I have on my site right now are all trips that I paid for, either with money or more miles.
And are all of these family vacations with your husband?
No, it's about 50-50. I mean, I do love taking my daughter on trips, but I'm also fine with leaving her at home with the grandparents. We have lots of grandparents who are ready, willing, and able to watch her, which is great. So we try to go on as many trips with just my husband and I as we can. Yeah.
Makes sense. Do you ever do the solo travel thing?
No, I have no interest right now at this point in my life. Who knows, that might change someday. But right now it's either family trips with my daughter and a lot of times extended family as well, or it's just my husband and I.
Cool. So in your day-to-day family life, what are some of your go-to credit cards and some of your favorite ways of earning points and miles?
My go-to credit cards, I kind of have a few that I use probably 90% of the time. Chase Sapphire Reserve is my go-to for dining and travel purchases. Love that card. Most of my grocery spending right now I do on my Amex Gold card because you can get 4 times points. And I spend a lot of money at the grocery store, so that really adds up. And if I have a big project or something, I'll go get gift cards at the grocery store with the Amex Gold and then use those to purchase whatever I need. We did our closets earlier this year, and I got gift cards for the Container Store at the grocery store, got all those points, and then went and used those to buy my closets. In addition to those 2 cards, I have the Chase Freedom for those 5 times bonus points, rotating categories. And then anything that doesn't fit into any of that goes in my Freedom Unlimited to get 1.5 times points. Chase points are what I prefer, so I tend to go towards Chase cards for my everyday spending.
That's a really good system, and that covers most of the general large categories that people have spending in: restaurants, groceries, And are you able to generate points and miles out of your writing career as well for the blog? Are there any business expenses that you're able to use?
Right now, for any business expenses that kind of don't fit into a bonus category, they're going on my Freedom Unlimited right now. So I'm getting 1.5 times points on those.
You don't have a favorite business credit card, Chasing Preferred,
No,
or anything like that?
I have 1 or 2 business credit cards right now, but I don't love them. So I stick more with the personal cards right now. I would like to get an ink one of these days, but I was waiting till I was under 524. And then this year's been kind of, strange. So I haven't really pulled the trigger on it yet. But one of these days I'll get that ink card.
Fair enough. And then I'm sure a lot of people also imagine the life of a travel blogger as you get to expense all of your different travels because technically it's for work. Is that how it works in the real world? Where if you were to pay for something in cash and you say, oh, it's for my blog, so it's a business expense. Are you able to do that?
No, not at all. Not at all. Most of my trips are like a normal vacation that anyone would take. I happen to write about them. I'm not writing off all these expenses on my taxes. It's not full-time travel. My life is pretty normal. I'm a stay-at-home mom. Most of the time I'm not traveling and I'm home. So yeah, being a travel writer is not what I think a lot of people would assume it is. It's great and I love it, but it does involve travel, but it is a lot of work at home. It's a lot of writing about things that you've already done. It's a lot of researching destinations and how to get there and what to do. There's a lot of back work for a simple trip.
What is some of the back work leading up to a trip that you would take either on points and miles or sponsored trip or anything else? What does that ramp up look like?
For a sponsored trip, it's you really have to become familiar with the destination before you go. So I research what to do. A lot of times for a sponsored trip, they'll kind of, a visitor's bureau will give you ideas or they'll say, this is where I want you to go. Sometimes they just say, let us know what you want to do. So you really have to research the area, know exactly what you want to do, figure out how you're going to squeeze it all in. And then I actually do a lot of writing for that kind of a trip beforehand, researching the locations, the specifics, contact information, how to get there, what to do. A lot of that is actually researched beforehand. And then I take the trip and I go back in and I pepper in personal recommendations, my experience, sort of tips and tricks that you can only pick up from actually going to a location. So when I do a trip that is going to be a points and miles trip, those are not sponsored. Those I just do on my own. And it usually starts for me with the destination. And a lot of times it's what resort do I want to go to? I start with that hotel or resort in mind. I figure out what points I need to make that happen. If I don't have those points already banked, I will start switching my spending to a different credit card. I might get a new credit card if I need a big chunk of points and I don't have, let's say a Marriott card or a Hyatt card, I'll get a new one. If I already have one, but my husband doesn't, I'll open one in his name so I can get a big chunk of points. And then I kind of go from there. If it's a pretty close destination, like let's say I'm going somewhere in the Caribbean, I generally don't do points for those flights. I'll either pay for them because they're generally not that expensive, or if where I'm going, if Southwest flies there, I fly on Southwest if I can. So I'll use those points for that. So it's kind of a building block. For me, it's where I want to go, and I sort of build out from there and decide what points I need, what spending I need to put on which credit card, and if I don't have the right credit card, I'll get a new one.
For Southwest, do you use the Southwest specific credit card, or is it always just transferred from your Chase?
Yeah, for my Southwest points, I rarely, if ever, transfer from Chase just because the points value, you're not getting much value out of those. If I have points built up in my Southwest account from, let's say, a credit card, I'll use those. But if I don't have Southwest points, I'm usually just paying cash for those. But I do have a couple Southwest credit cards. So right now I have a huge stash of points there. So I will use those, but I generally will not transfer over from Chase because I can get better value out of those points using them elsewhere.
What are some of your favorite places to transfer your Chase Ultimate rewards where you can see you can get a lot better value?
Hyatt is my favorite. I love Hyatt hotel redemptions. You can get some really amazing stays using Hyatt points, and Hyatt points I think are valued. They're valued pretty high. I forget what the actual points is, but I've found that I can easily get 2-3 cents per point in value transferring my Chase points to Hyatt and then booking a stay. Last year we stayed at the Andaz, Costa Rica, which was phenomenal. We've booked trips at Park Hyatt Chicago, the Conrad Chicago, Grand Hyatt Kauai, like I said. What was the other one? Those are the only Hyatt ones I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, Hyatt is my favorite transfer partner from Chase right now because I do focus a lot on hotels more so than flights at this point.
That sounds incredible too. You mentioned Hawaii, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about what that stay was? Which hotel was it that you stayed at?
We stayed at two, actually. The Hawaii trip was, I guess it was 2 summers ago now, and it was a big family trip. So there were, I think, 11 of us. And we did 10 nights. We stayed 5 nights at the Grand Hyatt Kauai and 5 nights at the Wailea Beach Marriott in Maui. And I've gotten a couple of my family members into points and miles as well. So for those of my family members who didn't have points or didn't have enough, we were able to kind of share points to make sure everyone was able to go. So the Grand Hyatt Kauai was a great redemption. First of all, you get great value from Hyatt points, but when you book a Hyatt with points, you don't have to pay the resort fee. And for that particular hotel, it was $45 a night. So that's a huge savings. And then we were also able to book the club level room, which I think is called the Grand Club at that hotel. And that gave us access to free breakfast, which is a huge savings at a resort like that. Because, breakfast can go for $30, $40 a person. And they had appetizers throughout the day and snacks. And then they actually served a light dinner every night. So if you really wanted to, you could eat dinner at the club, the executive club as well. So I loved that redemption. It was so good. And that, it's that hotel rooms go for $500-$600 a night. And then the Marriott that we stayed at in Wailea Beach, we did 5 nights there as well. And when you book a Marriott with points, you get the 5th night free. So we were able to book 4 nights and we got the 5th night free. So that was a great, great deal too. And that was a fairly expensive hotel as well. And what I loved about that trip was there were, I think, 11 of us going. And we were all in different walks of life. We're all in different stages. Not everyone would have been able to afford those hotels that we chose without points, but we made it happen with points, and we were all able to go to this luxurious vacation, all thanks to just having points and knowing how to use them. It was great. It was a great trip.
That sounds so great, especially with, you said 11 family members?
I think it was 11 of us, yeah.
Talk a little bit about how to transfer points between family members. Did you just book something in your name with your points, or do you actually transfer points from your account to their points?
You can transfer points. I know, like, my husband and I can transfer points, but the way, we paid for ours on our own. I believe my mom, she had extra points, and I believe that she was able just to book extra hotel rooms with her points. So we didn't actually technically transfer points around to different people, but we were able to book enough rooms with the points that we all had to kind of take care of everyone. Since everyone sort of had some points, a couple people didn't. So we were able to just sort of make that happen for everyone. So,
nice.
Yeah.
And how much writing content were you able to get out of that one trip?
I actually didn't write very much about it. I did a hotel review for each of the hotels we did, but I think that's it. Yeah, some trips I don't write about, some trips I do. So that particular trip, I did my hotel reviews because I really like doing those, and that was the extent of it for that trip.
I think it's important to remember to just enjoy being there sometimes rather than every time. I know some people can get so absorbed into every time you're on a vacation, I have to generate content for this. I have 10 other family members here, but they're just going to go enjoy surfing and luau's and everything on their own while I am head deep in a computer generating photos and content. And so I really like the answer that you gave of this was a huge trip. A lot of organization and coordination went into it with a whole bunch of different people. And I only wrote a little bit of content because it's so important to just enjoy yourselves too. If you're getting into miles and points just so that you can write all of these articles and then take all of these trips and take all of these photos, but you don't actually get to enjoy being there, then I think that takes away from the experience a lot too.
You're so correct about that. And in the beginning, I kind of fell into that where I thought, well, if I'm going on this weekend trip, I have to write 5 articles about this trip and, every little aspect. And you're right, it does kind of take away from some of the joy or some of the relaxation. So I've gotten to the point now where I probably write about every trip I'm in, but sometimes I just don't. And that's okay. And I just go and enjoy and know that maybe I'm not going to write about it. And that's just how it's going to be.
Nice. And for when people are looking into the networking side of, okay, I want to work more with the tourism bureaus and everything else, what are some pieces of advice that you have for who should you connect with? How should you connect with them? How do you even start these conversations of, hey, I'm a travel writer, travel photographer, whatever your medium is? How do you start this pitch process?
That's a really good question. I've found that, there are some instances where I will contact a visitors bureau and say, hey, I'm coming out to the area. I would love to work with you to produce some sponsored content. And occasionally they'll be like, okay, yeah, that's cool. A lot of times you're going to hear nothing. It helps to have a little bit of a foot in the door. A lot of that is networking with local bloggers or other travel bloggers. I have a lot of relationships with travel bloggers that I've never met, but we've connected on Instagram. And you just start talking and you kind of like say, oh, hey, I worked with this visitors bureau. They're really great to work with. And then maybe you can contact them and, say, hey, told me I should contact you. There are also different events that will happen. I know here in Columbus, different states will have sort of a travel writer night, and they'll send visitors bureaus to kind of network and talk to us. And I've gotten some great relationships out of that. Sometimes they just come out of the woodwork. They see you on Instagram or they see your blog and they'll contact you and just say, hey, we'd love to work with you. So it kind of happens a little bit of everything. I know, at least for me, it doesn't happen right away. I worked for years as a travel blogger on my own before I started getting any of these sponsored trips. So it takes a lot of work. It's not something where you can just put up a blog and the next day expect visitors bureaus to be knocking down your door. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of networking. It's a lot of just getting out there, getting your name out there, being on social media, having your blog, keeping it updated. And eventually it, after a lot of work, it starts to happen.
Nice. So go to local meetups, meet with the different bureaus. You can email them. Sometimes they email you back, so it never hurts to reach out. Network with local bloggers so that you can recommend contacts and destinations and tips with each other as well. I love all of those tips. When you are emailing a tourism bureau, do you normally just send a one-line introduction of yourself first to say, hey, my name's Katie. Here's the link to my blog. I'd like to do some sponsored content. Let me know if you'd like to chat more. Or are you sending out the full pitch right then and attaching a media kit, attaching writing samples? What do you even send them?
I've done both ways, and I found that I get the best response when I have a specific angle or a point of view that I want to write about. This summer I did, obviously we're not really traveling this year, unfortunately, but I did a couple of really small little road trips, and I had good success with emailing visitors bureaus saying, hey, I want to write about a road trip to your destination and focus on activities that you can do with children. Because a lot of families are doing that now because they can't fly everywhere. So I've had the best success when I have a specific point of view and I kind of give them, I introduce myself, I sort of give them my pitch, what I think I'd like to write about. If there's specific attractions in their destination, I mention those. I think they like it when they can see that you've researched their area a little bit and that you're not just blindly sending out things to see what kind of free trip you can get, where you actually say, like, this is what I think I should write about. This is why I think it's good for your destination. And a lot of times they'll be very interested in that.
That makes sense. I imagine that if you were to ever email a tourism bureau and say, hey, you want some sponsored content? I'll write about whatever. You want top 5 things to do in New York City? They're going to be like, who are you? Did you email this as a chain letter to everybody? So being very specific and inceptioning the idea of here's the kind of article that you're going to get so that they can be, so that it's just easier for them to imagine what they're going to get out of this instead of top 5 things to do. Are you going to Google the top 5 things to do and just put those in your article?
Exactly. Yeah. You got it.
Cool. So I'm sure a lot of people also wonder, what does the pricing negotiation process sound like? Once you've got somebody hooked where they say, yes, we are interested in sponsored content, how do you then approach negotiation to say, this is my fee per word, per article? What's that process?
It varies. It really does. I do some work that's paid by the word. Most times sponsored posts like that are not. A lot of times they'll just offer your accommodations and your meals and some extra gift cards. Some places will pay a fee as well. It really depends. It varies. It's kind of all over the map.
Do you normally wait for them to give their offer first and then you counter, or do you come to them with a recommendation?
Yeah, that depends too. I usually try to go in very clearly and say, this is what I can offer you. This is what I can do for you. And this is sort of what I expect in return. I've found that the couple times where I'm not super clear, even if I think I'm being clear, that can lead to a lot of misunderstandings. And that's not good. I found it's best to be upfront and say, this is what I can give you and this is what I expect back in return. And usually most places are pretty happy with that. Just let's put it all on the table. Let's not pretend. Let's go over everything right now. Because if it's not going to be a good fit or if it's not going to work, it's best for everyone to kind of know that right at the get-go.
And you definitely don't want to write an article and then have them go, wait,
right.
We're supposed to pay you for this?
Exactly.
You're like, yes, give me my money that was agreed upon. So from that side, what's the contract? Like, do you just, once it's all on the table, as you said, do you just send over a contract and say, here's how it's going to
go? Sometimes there's a contract. On some smaller partnerships I've done, everything is so spelled out in email. And we kind of go back and just say, like, please confirm, X, Y, and Z that we discussed. For smaller things, I'm comfortable with that as a contract because it is written. But for most things, it is good to have a separate contract, which then, each party can sign.
Does anybody ever say, we will pay you based on the number of clicks of your article or anything like that?
I've never done anything like that. I'm sure it exists, but no, I've not gotten into that.
Cool. This has been fascinating, and I'm sure it'll be so valuable for anybody who wants to go into travel writing, either for miles or points or for any other angle for travel writing. So if you had to sum up all of your knowledge into one line, whether it is for travel writing or miles and points, what would your one key piece of advice be for listeners?
Keep it simple. At first, it's okay to keep things simple. And I know as a new travel hacker or someone just kind of interested in this, you're probably going to be reading these blogs with fantastic redemptions and amazing strategies. And I'm here to say it's okay to keep it simple, not get bogged down by all of that, especially in the beginning. Now, those are great. I love them. They're so much fun, to get into a crazy redemption. There's nothing wrong with that. But they can be really intimidating, especially to someone who's just getting into it or very curious about what this is all about. But like I said, when I started in travel hacking, I had a 2-year-old. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was not able to take those big, amazing trips because I had a toddler that I wasn't comfortable leaving for more than 2 days. So I think I said earlier, I focused on hotels where, I wasn't doing these amazing business class trips because I was doing short little domestic trips, but I could go to a fantastic hotel for the weekend. One of my favorites was I got the Hyatt card way back when it offered 2 free nights anywhere in the world at any Hyatt hotel. And so we used that to stay at Miraval in Arizona, which is a super swanky wellness resort. And it was awesome, but it was a simple redemption. but it was something that I could do at the time as a stay-at-home mom. So start slow, keep it simple, and remember that a good points redemption doesn't have to be complicated. I always like to say, if your points can get you somewhere you could not have otherwise gone, it's a good redemption. So I guess that's my piece of advice.
I love that.
Okay.
I absolutely love that. And now I will ask you to give out a travel hacking shout out to anybody who you think has really good travel hacking advice, content that other people should follow, somebody who you've learned a lot of great tips from.
One blogger I really admire is Leah she's got 2 blogs, The Frugal South and The Budget Mouse. And she doesn't have, her websites aren't super heavy in travel hacking content, but what she does write is related to budget family travel and to Disney, which is something that I don't see a lot in the points and miles sphere. So I think if you're into that sort of budget family travel or anything Disney, she's a great one to follow.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And where can we find you?
You can find me on my website, Zen Life and Travel. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at Zen Life and Travel. Instagram is probably the best place to find me. I'm on there most often. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for coming on the show today. This has been so informative for anybody who's listening and wants to get into travel writing or just get better with points and miles and upgrading their points and miles redemptions and leveling up.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Geobreeze Travel Podcast. If any of the cards or other tools mentioned on today's call piqued your interest, please use the links in the show notes to apply or to learn more about any of the cards. Commissions earned from these signups help to support the podcast. Additionally, the single best travel hack I can recommend is finding friends who can show you about even more travel hacks, and it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe to this podcast and share it with a friend. And if you would like to meet even more travel hacking friends, come join one of our travel hanging hangouts. We discuss behind-the-scenes tips, celebrate each other's wins, and mostly just enjoy being around other people who enjoy this hobby just as much as you and I do. If you would like an invite to the next one, just head over to geobreezetravel.com/hangouts and sign up to be on the invite list. See you there, take care, and happy travels.